Today we are going over the 7 deadly personal finance sins that, if you partake in for too long, can virtually guarantee that you stay in or end up in personal finance hell, aka becoming or staying broke. But on the other hand, if you can avoid these 7 finance sins, not only will you most likely not go broke, but it can help you financially thrive. So let's go over them. As always, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. The first deadly personal finance sin is actually something that can take place quite young in our lives when we really don't know much better. And that is getting an expensive college degree in a field with low job prospects or low salary expectations. Now look, I'm a big advocate of pursuing your goals no matter what. With that said, at the end of the day, getting a degree is a huge financial decision. And if it's not well researched, it can literally screw you for the rest of your life. I've talked to way too many people personally who are walking around with tens of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, and you can just tell it is a huge unnecessary burden. And getting a bachelor's degree is not just expensive, but it is a 4-year time commitment where you will most likely be making little to no money. Now, I am by no means anti-college, but I am anti-wasting your time and money to get a degree that won't make you any money. And you also have to understand that colleges don't give a shit about you. Now, that doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that it's on you to actually research and figure out what degree you want to get and what the job prospects after are. Because at the end of the day, colleges want to enroll students, create research, and push scientific breakthroughs, which are all good things. The problem is those things cost money. And to pay for them, they want your money. So if you're going to get a degree, understand the job prospects and understand the salary expectations. And understand that 2 identical people can spend identical sums of money and end up in vastly different places because one spent $50,000 on a STEM degree for a high demand job and the other spent $50,000 on a degree with no salary or job prospects. University is a good thing and it can change your life, but the degree that you choose is just as important. College really shouldn't be looked at as a find yourself part of life where you pursue a random degree. It should be looked at as a major financial decision and treated as such. The second personal finance sin is paying everything in cash and or not owning a credit card. Countless times I've heard people being proud of themselves for paying everything in cash. In fact, the dude on the thumbnail of this video is a big proponent of doing just that. And first and foremost, if you are proud of yourself for paying everything in cash, good for you. There's nothing really wrong with that. But at the same time, you're shooting yourself in the foot for a couple of reasons. The first is that you are literally leaving free money on the table. There are credit cards out there that offer anywhere from 1 to 5% cash back on all kinds of things simply for using that credit card. For example, I have a credit card that gives me unlimited 2% cash back on every single purchase. That means I'm essentially getting a 2% discount on everything. And then for example, Amazon has a 5% cash back card on every purchase on the website. 5% is literally the amount off on some sales at some businesses. And then on top of that, there are cards that give you 3% cash back on various things like restaurants or putting fuel in your car. So why not use them? Why pay cash for everything instead? Well, the major argument is that owning a credit card incentivizes overspending. And then you end up in this crippling debt that you can't get out of because credit card interest rates are like 15, 20, 25%. And in a sense, that is what the credit card companies want. So that is true, but at the end of the day, that isn't really a credit card issue. That is a self-control and proper money management issue. But if you're watching this video, it means that you're probably inclined to better financial habits, which means that you can probably avoid overspending. Here's the thing, that's the first of 2 reasons that you're shooting yourself in the foot by not using credit. The next major way is that by not using credit, you're not building credit. And newsflash, unfortunately, the economic system that we live in requires credit for basically every major purchase, which means by not building it, it could become detrimental later in life, especially for those of you who want to become an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, eventually credit is going to become part of the equation, which means that whether you want to start a business or just purchase a car, you need to embrace credit, use it wisely, and of course, don't abuse it. The third personal finance sin is buying a new car. Yeah, boo me, I get it. But do you know how much value a car loses the moment that you drive it off the lot? Roughly 10%. And contrary to popular belief, a car is an asset balanced out by a liability, usually in the form of a loan or an expense in the form of cash outflow if you purchased in full. Which means, for example, if you buy a $40,000 vehicle, the moment you drive it off the lot, one of two things happens. Either A, you paid $40,000 in full and you instantly lose $4,000 of your net worth the moment you leave the lot. Or B, you financed it and now you have a loan debt that is $4,000 more than the asset you just purchased. And yes, of course, that's not taking into account down payment, which is usually required. Usually required specifically because the finance department is not fucking stupid and they don't want you driving around in an asset that's worth less than what you owe them. In either case, simply buying a slightly used car with a couple thousand miles on it completely eliminates this problem. And your break-even period on that vehicle is going to be much shorter. The point is, usually, buying a brand new car should be reserved for those who are already in a very strong financial position, where the loss in their net worth doesn't really matter. But for a lot of people, that $3,000 to $5,000 loss in net worth is like 10 to 20% of their total net worth. Just gone. Poof. In an instant. The fourth personal finance sin is renting forever. Now, I will be the first to state that the decision between renting a property or purchasing a property is not that cut and dry. I've said many times that renting can make a better option, especially in a high-priced, high-interest rate environment like the one that we're currently in. But the decision starts to lean heavier and heavier in the favor of purchasing if you're going to remain in a single location for more than just a few years. If you are going to settle down or remain in a location for say 5+ years, renting makes less and less sense, mostly because of equity. The first few years don't really matter because you're paying a majority of interest on a home loan, so it's virtually the same thing as renting. But after that, equity accumulation accelerates, and when you look at the net worth of the average American, a huge portion of that comes from home equity. In fact, the net worth of a homeowner is on average 40 times more than that of a renter. Yes, 40 fucking times. And obviously this is correlation, not causation, because the people who can afford to purchase a home usually make more money anyways. But the fact of the matter is, if you can afford to purchase a home and you plan on remaining in a single location for say 10+ years, then buying becomes the very clear winner. And personal finance sin number 5 is living above your means when you don't have to / not having a budget. And I say when you don't have to, because I understand currently for a lot of people, that's the only way to get by. If that's you, I'm not talking to you. You got to do what you got to do, and I completely respect and understand that. I'm talking to those who are doing it willingly, putting depreciating assets on credit, buying new cars when not needed, booking the more expensive hotel for no reason. You are quite literally fucking yourself in the long run. And that is also why budgeting is so important. There will always be rainy days and slower economic periods. Building your 6-month emergency fund, investing, having cash reserves should all come first. And if you don't do this during the good economic times, the bad economic times are going to be much worse than they had to be. Now, there is some good news here, and that's that nearly 75% of all Americans have a budget. With that said, that means that something like 90 million Americans are still not budgeting. So if you fall into that category, it's time to change. It's time to start budgeting. It's time to live within that budget whenever possible, and it's time to start using credit for appreciating assets, not toys and gadgets. The 6th personal finance sin is investing before paying off high interest debt. Most people assume that what they should do is take a portion out of their paycheck every single month and just invest that money. The problem is a huge portion of Americans have high interest debt like credit cards. And like we talked about earlier, a credit card can be a blessing or a curse. And if you hold high interest debt on your credit card, you should absolutely pay that off before investing any extra money. And the simple reason is that no matter how good you are at passively investing, the return on passive investing usually is somewhere around 10% year over year. And that will never come close to the interest charged on high interest debt like a credit card. And that means that say you have $5,000 of high interest debt, if you prioritize investing instead of paying that money off, you are actually losing money. You're losing the difference from the average rate of return and the interest charged on that debt, which can be anything from 10 to 15% per year that you are losing on any outstanding high interest debt. So one of the great misconceptions is that you should just invest. No matter what, take a small portion of your salary and invest. And yes, that is good thinking, but if you have high interest debt, you should prioritize paying that off first, primarily, before ever investing any money into investments like stocks or bonds or real estate. It's like having a ball and chain and having the ability to cut that ball and chain off before going and fighting for your financial future. In that case, you probably would cut the ball and chain off first and then go fight that battle. By not paying off your high interest debt first, you're doing the exact opposite. And personal finance sin number 7 is not investing. Assuming that you have already taken care of all your high interest debt, investing is a vital part to building your net worth. Did you know that only 58% of Americans invest in the stock market? That means that roughly 151 million Americans are not investing in or owning stocks. Not only that, but 58%, while a low number, is actually the highest it's ever been. Back in 2019, it was only 53%. I mean, to me, that just needs to change. Stocks and real estate are literally the main drivers to wealth creation in this country, and in the world, really. Stocks and real estate are also the two main places where millionaires are created. And just to drive that point home, the wealthiest 10% of Americans own 89% of the stock market. And while I completely understand that that has to do with the top 10% holding most of the people who actually created these public companies, it still goes to show you how important investing actually is. Now, for most people, that doesn't mean that you have to become like an expert in investing or trading. For most people, the best bet is absolutely just passively investing in exchange traded funds known as ETFs. These provide great diversification while still allowing you to take advantage of stock market upside. I challenge you to do a ton of research into ETFs and use them to your advantage. It'll make a huge difference in the long run, and it doesn't really have to be that complicated. For example, VOO, which is an ETF, provides great diversification across the entire S&P 500. And because it diversifies, it remains relatively safe, at least for investing standards. And of course, you can take it a step further and learn about investing and trading and fundamental and technical analysis. And for those of you that want to go down that journey, I completely encourage it. But for the average person, it is not needed to set you up strongly for retirement because a well-diversified ETF portfolio will do the trick. And that's without even touching on the bond market, which is another important part to investing, but that's topic for another video. For now, I just want you to know that not investing at all is one of the worst things that you can do for your financial future. There you have it, the 7 deadly sins of personal finance that everyone should try to avoid if possible. And if you have any thoughts or if you disagree with me, good. This channel is meant to be an open discussion and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter, so please feel free to leave those in the comments below. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing and turning on the bell notification. It helps the channel out tremendously. And with that said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week and I will see you in the next video. Take care.